So this isn't a terribly deep stack heads-up match, but they're deep enough to play some real poker here.
Well, Greg's raised made it 1 million, and Goo is going to stick around with 9-8 to see the flop. Here it comes, and it is a 9-8-3 two pair for Goo. Now, Goo has checked the two pair.
And Greg doesn't have much here, but he's going to take a little stab at it. And Goo with the slow play. Just going to call. 3 of diamonds on the turn. We've talked a lot about leading out when the board pairs and you're calling in the big blind, and Goo chooses to follow my advice there, although this is a slightly unusual spot. And wow, Greg calls with just queen high on the turn, huh?
Okay, we're on the turn, and there's already 3 decisions I really want to talk about. Let's rewind a little bit to the flop, to Goo not check raising. When he flops top 2 on a pretty wet board with the short stack in the tournament, seems like there's a lot of hands he could get it in against that he would love to get it in against. Why isn't he check raising with top 2 here?
Well, there's only one really good reason, and even then I'm not sure if it's good enough when we're out of position on this wet a board, but in this short. But the best reason to not check raise is if you believe Greg is sort of a bluffy, aggressive maniac who's just going to keep firing almost no matter what comes on turn and river. He's going to, put you to a test. You've watched him at this final table continuously triple barrel people, things like that. That might be a reason to decide, you know what, I'm willing to sort of like eat the potential problems that come of like all the scare cards that can come on the turn, which either make me a loser or kill my action. Even against good hands. Like if Greg has aces, but the jack of hearts comes on the turn, I might lose. I might not be able to get paid, right? Very much anyway. I think ultimately you have to raise this. I'm really surprised Goot doesn't, but that's my only good reason for why he might not raise.
Yeah, and those reasons all seem incongruent with his action on the turn, which is to lead the turn, therefore denying Greg the opportunity to continue bluffing if he's going to 3-barrel, right? So one possible explanation for this is that Goo was planning on letting Greg 3-barrel on innocuous cards, but the 3 is a card where he feels like he needs to protect his hand because any overcard that comes that would pair Greg's hand would then be a better 2-pair than Goo's 2-pair. So maybe if it was the 4 of spades on the turn, Goo would have checked and let Greg keep betting. I'm not sure. What do you think?
I mean, I think you're probably right that that's what's going on. It's either that or Goo knows that by 2018, everyone who was playing like in these bigger events and stuff like that, or at least a lot of players, would often lead from the big blind if the bottom card paired or the middle card paired, usually the middle card, but sometimes the bottom card as well. But this situation doesn't really, like you're saying, fit with what we've seen already. Like if we thought Greg had a good enough hand to call here, then we should be check raising the flop, right? If we don't think Greg has a good enough hand to call because he's going to barrel, I think we should eat the equity loss of he's going to hit an overcard once in a while and let him barrel. Let the overcard come if it comes and let him barrel. Like let's try and double up here. We need chips. We started the hand with like 23 blinds.
That's all correct, and it really should have cost Goo a lot to lead this turn. But it appears that it's not going to cost him at least this 1.5 million because Greg is somehow calling with the Queen 7 of diamonds, Jonathan. I can't find any combinatorial reason for this. Maybe he thinks the lead exemplifies weakness. I don't know. Does it matter? This feels just like an absurd call. Obviously, he's not doing it because he thinks he's ahead. He has some sort of plan, but why?
I mean, there are times when you have to give up the ghost, and this feels like a pristine time to give up the ghost. Like, what? There are cards that could come where we could block the nuts, I guess. Like, there's certain straightening cards that could come on the river where we block the nuts, but that is beyond
ambitious.
Aspirational. Yes. Like, it just doesn't feel like this is the hand at all. We want to have good blockers. We actually want to have some equity also when we call, so maybe we could actually make a hand. Now, maybe if we miss, we have a straight draw and we miss, then we could decide to take a shot sometimes. If he's calling with this hand, it means he's calling with probably everything, which means he's going to be in way too many spots on the river where he's going to be forced to bluff, right? And if Goo's paying attention, maybe he knows all this already about Greg, right? I mean, this is an absurd call as far as I can tell. Obviously, he's got intentions to steal it on the river, but you feel like you want to have at least a gut shot with this, right? We have one bad overcard. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't justify this call. I mean, the best justification, which is never a good one, is we've picked up some sort of physical tell on Goo, and we feel like he's uncomfortable, and therefore we're going to make a play. Why not make the play now then, by the way, instead of waiting? in case a card comes that emboldens Goo and makes it more likely that he'll call. Like, it's just seems like overall not a well thought out plan. It feels like fancy play syndrome at its finest to me.
Yeah. And we on the podcast, I speculated that perhaps Greg's been running over the entire final table, and it's been working because of all the ICM implications. But now that they're heads up, there aren't any more ICM implications, really, right? It's just like, you've already won second, so do you win or not? Like, someone has to end up with all the chips, and that's it. So maybe tactics that worked for him before, where people were making way too tight folds, just aren't going to work anymore, and he hasn't adjusted.
If you want to fail to adjust to your opponents, a great place to do it is Nitrogen Sports Poker, where the Poker Guys monthly tournament occurs. And guess what? Even if you don't adjust to your opponents in this tournament, it's still plus EV to play because it is the greatest iterated value in poker tournaments. Every month we put on this tournament, you have to use the link on our pinned tweet and our Twitter feed to enter, where the guarantee is 1,000 buy-ins, and they cap it at 300 entries. That means there's tons of value for you, Jonathan. The people love value, don't they?
They do. Everyone's all about that value. You know, when Burger King first gave away French fries, cars were lined up around the block for it. This is better than that, though. It's more value and a much higher upside, by the way, than a free small fry, which, quite frankly, isn't very good. Anyway, not only do they have this incredible poker value at the end of every month if you use the link to sign up, they, of course, have casino games. They have sports betting. It's the whole thing, baby!
Last card is an ace.
And that's a bad card for Goo. It's pretty reasonable that Greg would call the turn with ace high, and that'll slow Goo down.
All in.
Oh, wow, Greg has just bluffed all in. Well, look, if you're going to get to this river and then you get the perfect card to bluff it, man. I love this from Greg. And look, Goo has no time bank chips left, so if he runs out of his 30 seconds here, that's it. His hand is dead. He needs to figure out this puzzle in 10 seconds. Oh, Goo, what are you gonna do?
Call.
Oh, he did it just in time.
Call.
He has made the call, and Greg is stunned.
Well, that disgust that you see Goo exemplifying physically is not going to last long when he realizes he, in fact, does have the best hand. What is Greg doing?
Well, look, when Greg calls the turn with Queen 7 of diamonds, he better make a play at the river when Goo checks.
Yeah, I agree. I was
Especially,
just being hyperbolic.
I mean, yeah, especially honestly when an ace comes. That's a good card to do it on, right? A heart would have been good. Probably any card in the world, though, that Goo checks, we just have to take a shot at, period, because maybe Goo misses draw. Maybe he's afraid. Who knows? Who cares? If we're going to call the turn, we have to make a play at the river unless Goo bets huge himself, right? That's just how it is. So this is a good card to do it on, I suppose. I wonder if he needs to bet the full amount, if he actually needs to go all in or not. It's possible he could just bet really big and save himself a little bit every time Goo is calling and still have the same amount of fold equity. We got into a huge debate about this on our podcast about what's better. It's unclear what the answer is, I think, right now. I don't know, by the way, that Goo is calling with disgust. I think he's just calling because he doesn't have any time and he knows he has to do it quickly. He may not be disgusted. It's just an unclear spot.
Okay, well, he's really good at acting disgusted if he's not disgusted, all right? He looks disgusted to me, this guy.
But come on. Play it back as we're talking about it. People are not going to see disgust. There's no disgust.
Okay. We'll let the jury decide.
Yeah,
anyway,
maybe slight annoyance.
Let's be the judge, jury, and executioner about Goo's call here. Is this a good call? First question is, can we think of bluffs that make sense as played? And to me, the answer is a clear yes. I think Greg would play a lot of draws like this. The 3 pairing on the turn is not a great card for the draws, and Greg might just call with heart draws and open-enders and things like that. Do you agree with that, Jonathan?
I do. It's sort of a strange time to make a move. When we have the draws also and Goo leads the turn, that means he usually doesn't have draws. He can, of course. We could have a straight draw. He could have a flush draw, et cetera, et cetera. But if we have a draw, we have to believe we're going to get a fold. Otherwise, we shouldn't raise the turn. And we're in position. We're getting a good price. I think absolutely Greg can have draws here that he plays just like this.
Okay, so that's a point in favor of calling for Goo.
Yeah.
That means that Greg does have hands that are reasonable, that make sense, let alone the fact that Greg is capable of having Queen 7 of diamonds. And if we knew that before the hand started, then it's a slam dunk call. Now, the other side of the coin is, does Greg have a story of value that makes sense here? Are there a lot of value hands that we have to worry about? Which I guess would be aces up and beyond, right, as far as the good hands that Greg has. And most of the hands that are better than aces up are slow-played monsters, it seems.
Right. I think that's correct. Like, he has 3s full, he has 9s full, he has 8s full, although not too many combos of that since we actually have 9 and 8 in our hand, so we block that stuff pretty hardcore. But he can have some of those. I guess he can have pocket aces. But yes, I think you're right. It's mostly just big aces. Would he play a big ace like this? Would he play a small ace like this?
Right. That's a great question. And I think I have to wonder as Goo, like, if Greg is calling with some ace highs on the turn, is he calling with all of his ace highs? Like, is he going to call with ace 4? Or is he only going to call with an ace that also has another over to the board? Or is he not going to even call with some of those? Is he going to call with all of his ace 10s? I mean, it's not a great spot for those hands when Goo takes this line up until the turn. You wouldn't expect Greg to have that many ace highs in practice.
Well, or if we do think he has all the ace highs, it's because we know he's the guy who can also show up with hands like he has, like queen 7 suited, which
True.
means that doesn't help him, right? That hurts Greg because it means he's going to have way too many hands here on the river, and he's going to have to bluff with most of them, and then it's going to be an easy call. So if we think he can have all the ace highs just because, obviously ace high might call because he thinks it's good, but like, would he really call with ace 4 on the turn? Just with no draw? I don't know. Maybe the ace of hearts.
And then once he called, would he go all in? Because once he goes all in, he's hoping to get called by a 9, which I guess is fair once you get there if you have time to think about it, because with Goo's line, it really doesn't feel like you could beat an ace at the point of the river, right? So It feels like, yeah, you could shove with an ace, but you also have to be pretty sure you can get called by a 9 to make that profitable, because Goo could have a slow play every once in a while. So I don't know. It's a believable-ish story that Greg could have an ace, but I don't think it's enough of a factor to make me want to fold versus the story of the bluff, which makes plenty of sense as well, and makes a little bit more sense to me even.
Yeah, I mean, Greg potentially being a maniac means he might go on with all his aces on the river, but then again, that means he's going to go on with all his other stuff too, and he's got way too many bluffs again. So that being a maniac doesn't ultimately help him. It would help him if he actually had an ace, perhaps, to get called. He'd assume he could get called by a 9 or even an 8, perhaps, but it doesn't help him here, so who cares? Yeah, it feels like I think Goo just has to call here. I think there's just too many bluffs.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much I believe that Greg always is playing all his aces like this.
Yep. So we think it's a good call. The judge, jury, and executioner has ruled. Goo, you get to live another day.
Nice. Just one day, though. So there are lots of interesting plays on this one for sure. Not all the plays that we love or agree with. Boy, that turn. But even before we get to that, on the flop, Goo could have just check raised this hand. We like that. He chose not to. Turns out he got the full double up and wouldn't have gotten it otherwise. He got max value by just calling. Do you like that play? I know it worked out, but do you actually like it? We don't. Let us know what you think. But even more so, of course, on the turn, Goo leads, Greg calls. You have to weigh in about these plays. Mostly, I think about the Greg call probably, right? Like, how do you justify this? We can't really find ways to do it. Can you find ways where you think this is a good play? Why or why not? Let us know in the comments.
And if you want to hear more about why we think it's not a good play, listen to the podcast where we go far more in depth than we do on these videos. We also do 2 podcasts a week versus the 1 video a week, so it's double the content. It is the Breakdown Poker Podcast with the Poker Guys. We, the Poker Guys, highly recommend that you consume it and listen to it. Also, we have a book. It's called How Can He Fold? It's currently in a competition of sorts, I guess, at the time of this recording. And by now we'll know if we won the competition. I don't know. Either way, point is, it's a good poker book. It's fun. There's a picture of it on the screen there. There's a link in the description of the video. You can go buy it, an ebook or Amazon. Check it out. It's fun.